Everyone. It's actually a big pleasure for me to give this webinar. We've been working on this software for quite some time, and one of our forte is the way we have combined practice management and legal accounting. Today, in this webinar, we want to showcase, how you can be ready for the Law Society audit. That's the topic. So the agenda is roughly we want to explain what is the audit process. We want to discuss how do you prepare for one audit, right? Like what are the key elements you are audited for? We want to understand the process a little better. Then we want to get into the details of, what are the different elements. So, what is practice review? What is financial review? What is the technology review? And, the professional rules on conduct review. So basically the auditor are looking at these four top elements and trying to judge, your practice, give you back feedback so that if there's any errors, you can correct them. Lastly, we will try and cover this area of practice management and legal accounting solutions. Our feeling is, you cannot do one and not do the other and be approved. You need to do both. You need to have a good practice management and legal accounting solution together so that you can secure yourself and have a good audit proof yourself. Now, before I get into the presentation, I do want to get everyone into this document that LSUC produces. It's called a Practice Audit Basic Management Checklist. Now, I know the audience is intended to be paralegals, but if you actually go through this document, this has nothing specific to just paralegal practice. It's for all legal professionals. It talks about, if you look at the content, it clearly addresses, all your areas. So it looks at your practice, it looks at client service and communication, file management, financial management, the fundamental, area where they spend a lot of time in your audit. They also look at technology, professional management, time management, personal management, but the biggest one is financial management. Now, what I love about this document is the way the Law Society has organized this document. It's like a nice checklist where you can go yes, no on each question, and circle your notes and start preparing, for your audit. And they're very nicely laid out, what you need to do. What we have done is taken this document and augmented it and given our own comments, how you can use our software, and do that. We'll get into that later. But first, let's get back to our presentation here and talk about the agenda and continue further. So we have included that reference material in this presentation. So, if you view this presentation later, you will see that material. And most of this, material that we have put in reference is all Googleable, so so you can just get it straight out of Google as well. Okay. So, what is audit and why me? That's the primary question that most clients whom we have, when they get audited, ask the question, why me and what is audit? So, the primary purpose of audit is to support and promote a very high quality law firm, record keeping, by answering questions and providing guidance. So the intention is not to scare you or put you in some form of inconvenience. It's basically to kind of provide guidance, make sure that you're doing things properly. As part of this review, they look at private mortgages, mainly they look at trust and general record keeping requirements. Are you following the record keeping requirements as stipulated by Bylaw 9 properly? Is one of the key elements that are actually checked in the audit. And providing on-site support to ensure compliance with Law Society requirements. So if the auditor finds something, it's basically what he's trying to tell you is hey, you can do these things and correct yourself and kind of come into compliance much more easily. Why me? That could be a great question, And to me, the way I would look at that is the procedure is designed to be proactive compliance measurement and problem detection tool. At the end of the day, that's what an audit is. So spot audit measure the integrity of the law firm, financial filing, if they access ongoing compliance with financial record keeping requirements. Now, the reason why you should look at an audit very carefully is basically because you need to be prepared for it much longer. And that's why, the more proactive you are, the more better automated you are, the better software guidance you are, and the more help you have, you can be more compliant. What am I being audited on? And when should I start thinking about it, right? Now, there are fundamentally 4 categories on which you will be audited on. First one is your practice review. So the auditor will basically look to see if your practice is in conformance with what the law society is expecting out of you. Is the firm properly managing clients, matters, and procedures, mainly as per the law society guidelines? Okay. The reason why they are looking at these 3 things is because these 3 elements are what that basically drive, how you're actually doing your practice. Engaging your clients, talking to them, creating proper matters and procedures, and the guidelines basically talks about that. The second most important, area that you will be audited on is your compliance with your financial procedures. In the financial review, they're basically looking at, is your firm handling trust and general accounts as per the design of the financial bookkeeping guidelines? If you look at Bylaw 9 or the bookkeeping guidelines that that the Law Society has laid out, there are fundamental requirements on how you have to manage trust accounts and how you need to manage your general accounts. So as part of the financial review section, they will definitely review and go through with you whether you're doing these procedures properly. And this is where the checklist that I introduced initially is of great help, because it goes in detail. The bookkeeping guideline outlines the guidelines, but the checklist is the one that actually walks you through, individual elements of the bookkeeping guidelines so that you can understand it and say, oh, yes, now I am in compliance. The third area that you are now subjected to is what we call the technology review. Now, we are not living in, the 1980s or the 90s where most of the stuff was done over, paper and telephone. We are really living the digital age. So the Law Society will ask you questions about proper safety guards to protect itself and catastrophic technology failures. How are you handling that is what they're going to ask if the firm has those safety guards to protect yourself. And finally, they will review about your professional and time management. Is the firm taking steps to keep high standards in the area of professional rule of conduct and in the area of management? Now, the key thing, that we, want to kind of put into the DNA of the law firm is you should not be thinking about audit only when the audit is requested of you. I think it should be built in every day. Compliance should be part of the DNA of the firm in its daily execution. Okay, that's our view that, that if you build into the DNA of your company, the very fact that you will be compliant on a daily notion, just because you have good practice procedures, good financial procedures, and good technology audits, reviews, and all this stuff, you're protected every day. Next, the question is, when you get the letter saying that you're going to be audited, how do you prepare for it, and what does it, take to have a healthy law firm? At the end of the day, passing audit means flying colors means you have a very healthy law firm. So what does it take? So the first and foremost thing is audits are not designed to scare you or the firm. They are designed to find issues and correct them early. They have, there's no scare tactics here. The whole audit procedure is more focused on the health of your firm. It's to find if things are done the right way and they're compliant. And the more the compliance you have, the better understanding you will have of your business. So our question to you is, why not start from day one? Do it every day. Now, this is where people believe, oh my God, if I would do all these things every day, it's very, very hard. And this is where you need help. In our view, the way you structure this is what is going to help you. The way you structure this is you have a very simple checklist of things that you will do on a weekly basis, things you will do on a monthly basis, things you will do on a quarterly basis, and things you will do on a yearly basis, right? And what are some of these checklists? So the first recommendation is, on a weekly basis, you should definitely be looking at your bank accounts. Your trust in general, you should definitely be eyeballing them. You have to review all your transactions, make sure that, there are no obvious errors. For example, if the bank has by mistake charged you an interest and trust account, you don't want to wait till the month end. You want to catch it right away. So our strong recommendation is the bank statements, okay, in your software that you're using and your bank that you're using, you want to kind of view it on a weekly basis, both general and trust. Like, in general, like you just give a quick skim at it and say, okay, all these transactions make sense. There's no funny transactions so that, your business is not taking some huge hit. And similarly, in trust, you've got to look for those, early warnings of errors that the bank can commit on you by charging you interest or not doing the proper deposits, or putting some errors. You need to catch that on a very, very, very early basis. The next thing that, that we recommend is a monthly financial checklist. The monthly financial checklist is pretty much what the Law Society bylaw 9, lays out for you. You've got to prepare your trust and general ledgers for your month. Look at your journals, prepare them for the month, the receipt journals and the payment journals for both trust and general. And you have to have your 2 reconciliation statements, both trust and general, done every month. This is one of the biggest steps, that you have to incorporate, on a monthly basis. For us, the financial checklist has to be reviewed month by month so that, you're not ending up in this huge catch-up. Okay, that's our view with respect to protecting yourself on the financial side of the audit. The third piece is a quarterly review. Now, quarterly review need not be financial oriented. You have to review all your procedures, your case laws, your time management procedures, professional commitments, matter management procedures, and all that stuff. So basically, you can look at and say hey, are me and my assistants and the law firm doing client communications properly? Have all these clients been contacted? Maybe set aside a day, and just communicate on a quarterly basis to your client saying that, hey, this is where your file is. This is your settlement statement. This is your, your matter has been closed. This is, your non-engagement letters. Make sure that the checklist is at least addressed on a quarterly basis. Time management is something. Have you docketed everybody? Are you missing anything? Is there procedures? Are all your staff educated properly? This is your time to do those practice management checklists, right? So on a weekly basis, you review your bank. On your monthly basis, you do your financial checklist, which is all your preparation of ledgers and journals and reconciliation. On a quarterly basis, you review your process, your practice management process. On an yearly basis, you would actually do your year end and review the health of your business and financially and logically. That's basically you just look at your balance sheets, profit and loss statements, and say, oh, how did my month behave? How was your analytics? Now, by bringing these 4 checklists at regular intervals, in our opinion, you're ready for audit any day. You really don't care when the audit is going to happen. And that's how we believe you should be operating. None of the 4 steps measured here on a quarterly or a monthly or a yearly or a weekly basis should take more than an hour of your life. Verifying bank statements, that's a simple procedure. You get, just reviewing them by the eyeball, that's a 10 to 15-minute job. The monthly financial checklist, that was if you are doing on a month basis, you're going to have about 25 to 30 transactions, that you're going to do in reconciliation for trust, and similar in general. Now, if you find that even your monthly volumes are high, maybe you should go down to a fortnight. Let's say you're a big-time real estate lawyer and you have too many transactions going on. Your reconciliation for a month is getting a little harder because you have 100, 120 transactions. We would actually recommend that you do this either on a weekly or or a quarterly or a fortnight basis, so that you're more caught up. Okay. Now, quarterly practice management review to us is like a nice Sunday afternoon every quarter where you just take and you review and make sure all your stuff is all into place. And it's a great thing to do actually. In this one, you're reaching out to your clients, sending them all the letters that need to be sent. And, it's actually a brand experience too. When you do a good quarterly practice management checklist, at the end of the day, your client is going to be happy. He's going to receive an update, and he knows, oh, it's the end of the quarter. It's time for my lawyer or my paralegal to send me an update, and it's a great thing to do. So Now, obviously, if you're not prepared and if you're actually preparing these documents and not using software, this is not going to be a 5-minute process. But, we'll show you at the end of the presentation how these things can be automated so easily. Finally, the year-end and the health of the business is all about analytics. I would say right close to the Christmas time, before you go on holidays, this is something that you need to put into play into your firm so that you've verified everything and you're actually ready for the year-end. Then you actually come back, and on the 31st of December, you're able to complete your year. Moving on to the next section, let's now break open each of these. We're going to kind of break open practice review, financial review, technology review, and study each of these. Okay? So, what is practice management checklist, right? And what should you review when it comes to client management? Okay? And that's what we're going to cover in this section. Okay. So in client service and communication, right, the auditors are basically looking for good examples of where you're docketing properly, you're taking detailed notes, okay, and in the process, you're actually, making sure that the client matter is dealt properly. That's the fundamental thing that they're actually checking, as part of the practice management checklist. Now, this is a good point to have a checklist. Just make sure that, because sometimes it might be you. If you're not a solo and you have assistants, just make sure that they're following these procedures on a very regular basis. The second part is handling of retainer by depositing in trust properly, especially if it's paid in cash. This is something that they review and they say hey, are you handling cash properly when it comes to retainers? And several times it so happens that, retainers are paid by cash. The client might have not brought a check, and you don't want to just say no to them just because they did not get a check. So, it's very important that if it's a cash retainer, you're handling it properly. The third thing is handling joint retainers and other parties associated to the matter. Let's say it's a joint retainer matter. The auditor will confirm that invoices that you're actually sending are actually to both parties. So you may want to keep a few samples ready in this checklist and say, hey, this is a good sample that I can show the auditor saying, hey, look at this invoice. This is a joint retainer invoice, and it's been sent to both people the right way on this date. So preparing, for the audit based on this checklist will actually help you to go through the audit also very, very quickly. The third part that they're really looking in client service communication is, are you handling, fee complaints, procedures, and clarifications? This is somewhere maybe if you had an incident where someone asked you hey, for a clarification of a fee, or there was a minor, a clarification that you had to do with respect to how you invoiced, you can use that example. Maybe you can just take a printout of that email, communicate it with the client. What are the documents you send? Maybe you send a statement of activity, you send them a bill of cost. You can just put that as an example together and say, hey, this is how, this was done. So, so you're prepared. When they ask you for audit, you can say, hey, this is how I did this, and here is my sample. Now, providing clients with regular monthly, quarterly, and yearly updates. This is, and they ask you in the checklist whether you do it orally or in writing. Obviously, writing is better. So you can kind of have an example where you say, hey, this is what was done, and we did this, as part of the review. Okay. Now, the next thing is having disposition letters, letters of conclusion, and handling of matter closure procedures. So they'll ask you, hey, how did you handle matter closure? So probably you can take an example and be prepared and say, hey, look at this matter. I closed it on this date. I opened it on this date. And this is what I did with it. And this is the letters I sent. And here are the samples. Just keep them there. Okay? A good, well-reviewed non-engagement procedure, helps with ghost clients. So they ask for that. So you can say, hey, if you have any non-engagement template, you can show them that. Or if you have already sent one, you can kind of review and say, hey, this person engaged and then immediately disengaged, and I did this, right? That a proof of that is something that they are looking for. Now, the next part of practice management checklist when it comes to is matter management. So one part is how you're dealing with the clients, how you're exposing them to what you're doing, and the other part is matter management and internal procedures. They want to know, the auditors want to know whether you're doing things in a way that's effective. Like, for example, they'll ask you questions on file naming conventions. Now, obviously, if you use a software, this is not even going to be a question, but, they'll be asking you questions on file naming convention. They'll ask you questions like if the same client was a repeat client, did you create 2 different matters? So a good idea to kind of answer this question would be show an example where you say, hey, here is a matter. He came twice, once for a purchase of a house and another time for a sale of a house, and I created two different matters and I handled the procedures this way. An example, will speak for itself, and you will basically be able to answer this question in seconds, right? And also note that if you had really done that, you kind of have done so well in your practice as a daily process that the audit was just validating what you did. Similarly, they're going to be checking on organization of files and time docketing procedures, right? And if you've been doing this, if you organized all your files and softwares do that, these questions become very, very easy to answer. Are you creating proper retainer letters with established nature of scope, fee structure, disbursement, charges, penalties, interest, and termination clause? So a good way to answer this question would be having a sample and saying that, hey, this was a retainer that was sent on January the 3rd, and look at that. It has all the scoping. This is my template, and this is what I send to every client. It already has the scope of the work, the fee structure, and maybe you have multiple retainer templates for each area. Maybe for family you send a different one, for POA you send a different one, for landlord and tenant you send a different one. Showcasing them each of the samples is a good way to kind of answer that question. Are you maintaining proper matter status? Do you know which ones are active, closed, archived, right? Do you maintain active and closed lists? These are some of the questions that they ask. When was that list last updated? So if you use software, this is fairly trivial. It's just it's a lookup, and you can say, hey, look, in software I can find out what are my active matters in 2 seconds, right? Then the next question they're going to ask you is, for a given matter, are you doing proper separation of dockets and disbursements? They don't want you to confuse your client in your email where you mix dockets and disbursements. So they're clearly asking you that question. Are you handling that properly? And then there are questions like, do you have proper closing procedures for a matter? Do you send your clients closure statements, statement of activity? How are you basically handling closure is another key area that you're going to be reviewed upon. So we kind of touched 2 areas of practice management review. One is client service and communication, and the other one is matter management and internal procedures. So roughly, this will be the first part of your audit. After your introduction, they're going to kind of question you on how you're doing your practice. You will get a few good feedback and comments based on how you're doing it. To us, if you're using a good practice management software, this is pretty much covered. This is a piece of cake. You can just walk over it and say, hey, this is how we do it. Let's move on next to retainer. Generally, we've seen that auditors spend quite a bit of time reviewing retainer structures and making sure you are communicating the right thing. I threw in a definition of retainer from Wikipedia. A fee paid in advance to someone, especially an attorney, in order to secure or keep their services when required. Retainer is a great tool. When you get money in trust, you already, are holding your fees and disbursements, and you're not really waiting for the client to pay when you actually do the services. So the collection of retainer is a very, important task, and having a retainer letter is also very, very important. In the retainer letter, you clearly want to have the nature and the scope of the work. You want to clearly state the client obligations, what's expected of him. The frequency of communication, if a client is expecting an update every week, you might as well clarify that that's not happening. You're only doing an update every month or maybe once every quarter. So, the frequency of communication, you may want to be very clear on that. Fees/cash retainer arrangements, making sure that how you're going to pay. If it's retainer, how that's going to be covered, making sure that's all covered. Termination clauses, if you don't want to retain the person or he decides not to retain you, what's the clause? What's, how much will be the fees that will be deducted? Then use of consultant and other agents, if you're outsourcing the work, being very clear, what you're doing, confidentiality, and finally, the risk of using technology such as email. You want to cover that as a clause to say, hey, we have this. Okay. In the end, we'll just quickly walk through some samples and show you how these things are done. And then now let's move on to the real meat of the audit, which is financial management. In financial management, they start right from your fee structure and how you're handling retainer. Slowly they enter into your trust account procedures, then your general, and finally they make sure all your taxes are all captured. Okay? These are in broad high level, these are the 5 to 6 things that they're really looking for in your financial management checklist review. So to do this, your checklist should pretty much be hey, are you capturing proper fee structure in your retainer, right? And is that properly established, and do you have it even captured in your matter properly? And if you have multiple legal counsels and assistants, are their rates actually captured? That's key. Now, several matters can have different kind of fee structures. You could have a contingency fee or a block fee. Are you clearly stating that, right in the retainer, and handling it properly is another key thing that an auditor will check. And this is where an example can really help. You can say, hey, this matter of small claims, I did it as a contingency. As you saw here, I didn't take any retainer. At some point, the upon paid a settlement amount. I paid so much to my client. The remainder I invoiced and then transferred it from trust to general to pay myself. So you can kind of show that, walk through that example of how you lived your life in that example, and that should be pretty good enough. Okay. Similarly, retainers should have sections, that cover charges that include disbursements and cost recovery expenses. If you're charging, for fax, if you're charging for, other things, you may want to kind of include them and tell them hey, this is what you're kind of doing, in this procedure. So that's very important that you kind of say that. Okay. The next thing is, do you have proper procedures to issue receipt? Now, anytime you accept trust money, or if you're getting a payment for general, it's a very good habit to send them a receipt, because now you have confirmation from both parties that you actually received this money and you actually gave them a receipt. It's documented, and it's a great way to maintain that. Now, the auditors do look for that procedure, and especially if it's a cash retainer, definitely they look for that, because you need the signature of both yourself and the party. Now, if the retainer was obtained in cash, a proper demonstration of the procedure of how it was handled, and a detailed recording of the day of the receipt and the day of the deposit. Okay, that's something that they're looking for. So you can very clearly show, that you've recorded the date when it was received and the date when you actually deposited that into trust account. If you're using software, that's even more easy, but otherwise also you can deposit. Are you capturing disbursements incurred and paid out of trust and general property? This is a key element. They'll be looking for disbursements and saying, if you're paying out of trust, how are you capturing it? And if you're paying out of general, how are you capturing that? And then how are you recovering what needs to be recovering? And then also, are you marking taxes appropriately? Are you marking the right ones that need HST, or the right ones that where the HST is exempt? Are you doing all those things? Will all be reviewed as part of fee handling structures and all that stuff. Let's move on to the next section of financial management. In this section, they're basically looking at your methods and your procedures for doing the following. First one is, how are you raising invoices? The second one is, how are you validating your invoice balance is something that they really look at. Are you basically having a mechanism where you can quickly get all the matter balance and all the invoice balance? Can you quickly get that? And then finally, can you see how much of a balance from trust transfer from trust to general do you require to make? Do you have these procedures into play? That's what they're asking. In terms of invoice, they're asking you, are you raising invoice in a timely fashion? A demonstration of how you've been raising invoices is really good. Are the taxes properly captured in an invoice? Let's say you have an HST number. Are you actually charging the client proper HST and capturing it? If the client has concerns or complaints about the fees, do you have internal procedure to address that? That's always asked for. If getting paid from trust, are you paying disbursements out of trust? If so, how are you capturing them? And then ensuring that you're not over withdrawing. Making sure that you always have an eye and you've never over withdrawn, for a client is something that they look for. And then getting paid in general, are you ensuring that your amount received in general is always less than the invoice outstanding? Because that's a violation of trust. If you for example, if you raise invoice for $500 and the client actually pays you $600 in a check, that check has to go to trust account and not general account. So they're looking for such a kind of exceptions. And if you're paying disbursements in general, are you tracking it and recovering it properly? Is something that they always look for to make sure they're happy with that. Moving on, the next part is how are you handling the 3 accounts and what are you maintaining in each of that. So in this part, when it comes to trust account and general account, what are they looking for? So in trust account, they're looking for client trust ledgers. Now, if you look at the bookkeeping guidelines, the client trust ledger clearly states that you need to, for every client, you need to maintain row by row of the receipts and the payments that went on for a particular matter. So if the same client has multiple matters, you need to have multiple tables where you're maintaining that. The second one is managing trust receipts and disbursements properly. Are you doing that? For any receipt that happens, are you maintaining a journal for trust receipts and trust disbursements properly? That's something that they look for when it comes to trust account. Then a demonstration that you've been doing monthly trust comparisons and reconciliation. So if you have your last 6 months of reconciliation and you show them, hey, here's my reconciliation, look at my bank statement, I've recorded that, and these are my outstandings, just showcasing that to them, is more than enough. Now, right here, you're seeing that you cannot do this 5 days before an audit, right? Financial safety guard has to be done on a weekly and a monthly or a bi-weekly basis, so that when audit is coming into play, you're just showcasing them how you're doing that rather than actually preparing your financial statements at that time. If you are preparing financial statements 5 or 10 days before audit, trust me, it's going to not go as smooth as what it could have potentially gone. That's why we always recommend that you build these rules into your DNA of your firm so that this is not kept to the last minute. Now, they also review things like Form 9A. Then they also look like deposit slips. Are you doing all that stuff? These are all procedural aspects of trust accounts. They make sure you're doing all that stuff properly. What about general accounts? So, what about general accounts? In general accounts, some of the key things that you need to remember is they are looking at your receipts, disbursements, journals, and your expenses basically. They want to make sure that you're actually maintaining a FeeBook. Are you having all the invoices and disbursements that you raised? Are you having that? Are you having an expense book where you have all your expenses captured with proper taxes, HST, GST, and PST properly? Then are you recording discounts and write-offs properly? They are checking that as well. If they're doing any write-offs, are you maintaining that? Are you doing your general monthly reconciliation is another key element that you will be checked on, right? If you are missing that, they'll be asking you whether are you missing that, okay? Finally, for taxes, they'll be looking at your receivables and payables and saying, hey, are you managing both sides of the spectrum properly? The next aspect is of the practice audit review is getting into the details of how you're managing your client updates. One of the key questions here is the frequency of how you're doing it. So how are you managing your updates and how frequently are you doing it? So clarifying invoices, it will be a question how are you clarifying invoices, and if you have a good statement of activity, statement of accounts, bill of cost, statement of statement of settlement. These are something that you can offer to your auditor and say, hey, look, John had a question about his invoice, and I provided him these statements, and it was clarified in seconds, right? So that would be a good one. Do you have standard procedures for monthly, quarterly updating your clients? Do you do it verbally, or do you do it in writing? In writing, you can provide them with invoice balance, statement of activity, and accounts and settlements. Now, this also is, when you do this, it's a quality of service that you're providing to your clients, right? If your clients are so updated on a monthly or a quarterly, whatever your cycle is, that that when they are going to refer you, they're going to be thinking about that. So the auditor is not just looking to kind of catch you for your mistakes. He's more like trying to fix things that can help you grow your business, right? So that's how I would look at that part. Matter closure procedures, like, these are basically to make sure that you don't have any outstanding balance and, your financials are up to date. Like, does your closing procedures include returning of client material back to the client, like a full statement of settlement and accounts, just so that, like, they exactly know what happened. And finally, a matter closure letter, with a proper transfer of file if applicable. Like maybe if the file is moving away, you can generate a transfer of file statement and, kind of close it very nicely. You leave the client with a very good taste. So just to quickly review, in the financial section, they're looking at your retainer, they're looking at your fee structure and how you're actually handling retainer, more so cash, like, they're making sure that you're doing the right thing. And then they're looking at the way you're raising your invoices. And then we are also looking at invoice balance, like, how you're doing stuff there. And then making sure that, like, you're getting paid in trust properly and getting paid in general property. And then in this section, they're looking at how you're handling your trust accounts, mainly the trust ledgers, disbursements, comparisons, and Form 9A, and maybe deposit slips and other stuff. In general, they're looking at, again, ledgers, receipts, fee book, very important, expense book, and write-offs. And are you doing a monthly reconciliation of general properly? And finally, are you maintaining records of taxes received and paid? And then finally, if there's any clarification required on the financial aspect, like with respect to clarifying your invoices and financial statements, how are you doing handling your client, and your matter closure procedure is actually reviewed. The next one, that I would like to bring in is, are you reviewing your technology, right? And are you prepared when the technology actually fails you? Very important. We in the software industry take heavy safeguards on this, right? Like, we make sure we run our antiviruses properly, we make sure our computers are backed up, we make sure that the servers are backed up, we make sure the data is backed up, our procedures are backed up, we put guards on who can get access to what, like, we're not exposing all our stuff to everybody. So we do all that stuff. Similar things apply for a legal firm as well, like, because your data at the end of the day has to be available even if technology fails on you. So are you backing it up? Like, let's say you don't have internet for the day, can you function that day? Like, is your document management solution robust enough? Like, is your practice management and legal accounting software secure and highly available? Like, questioning the player, saying, hey, how is your security? Are you storing the data? Where is the location of the data? Questioning them like that would be of great help, right? And these are some things that you want to make sure that you do. And this is what your auditor is going to ask you, and you can have answers for them, saying, hey, I already reached out to my company, that provides me with practice management and legal accounting, and this is the answers they gave me, right? Are you running antivirus software for all your stuff, your network security? This is something that, that they will be reviewing, okay? Somebody indicated that audio is a problem. Is it just them or everybody? If you can just let me know, that'll be great. So far, nobody has indicated anything, but from here, the feedback looks pretty good. Anyway, this presentation will be available on YouTube as well for later review, but lastly, indication of any risks that you're taking with respect to using of technology. Like, let's say you're using a cloud-based software or you're using email, you want to clearly say that, like, this is what you're doing in your retainer so that your client is clearly aware of that. This is something that we've seen time and again. A lot of our clients have told us that auditors ask them this question, and our retainer samples have actually helped our clients because we put this right in our retainer sample. Now, where does practice management software actually help you? Like, what is the key benefits? Like, okay, when you have a practice management software and a legal accounting software combined together, we're not talking about software that just tells you, like, hey, do this, do that. Like, software that manages your finances, that can actually not just generate invoices, but it can exactly do the compliance documents that the law society wants. Those kind of legal accounting softwares, right? If you're using them, recording of events when they happen, it's pretty much like, it's a table stake. Like, you kind of do them when they happen. Okay, recording financial records and bank records, keeping them as close as possible using a reconciliation procedure, right, helps you to be there. And that's the key. Like, if your software cannot do reconciliation, then it's just a practice management software and it's useless for a legal firm. You You want to have one that has practice management and legal accounting, which can do reconciliation properly. So that's a very key element. Now, having a very complex reconciliation procedure does not help either. If you are having a reconciliation procedure that takes you hours, that's not going to help you either. You want to have a reconciliation procedure that you can finish in 10 minutes, right? Now, you maintain none of the above documents, you maintain none of the above and the software just generates them for you, right? You're not managing them. You're not writing, dollar figures and calculating HST. The softwares help you do all these things. Now, what do practice management and legal accounting softwares help you with? They help you with compliance. So as you see, during audits, you're not scrambling. You're just getting all these documents that should avoid penalties and sanctions from Law Society. And finally, it helps you for accountability. Even beyond the audit, using software like this helps you track your business. At the end of the day, you know, right, where you stand. What's your profitability? Where you stand? How much money are you making? Who's your outstanding? How many clients haven't paid? The auditors are going to come for a very short span and go, but your business is going to live for a long time. So using software like this and being accountable to yourself helps you understand your business better. Now, when you have such software, you have analytics. It kind of gives you a way by which you can compare month by month and say, oh, yeah, last month was better than this month. This is what I did now. This is what I did later. You can do that. And finally, it's all about, ease of use and how you can save time. If you have these software, you can do all these things. Now, the question that we always want to leave you with is, can you actually do without it? Our answer is no, because, at the end of the day, today's tools like this are there for a reason. They really make your life much simpler. You want to, and they're very accessible. Gone are those days where these tools were so expensive. Now they're really, easy to use, very intuitive in UI, and at a very, very, very affordable cost. So why would you not take that assistance? I put together, some of the audit reference, I found this great one, the spot audit guidelines, that's there in LSUC. The audit checklist, the one I showed initially, I'll come back to that in a few minutes. I will also allocate some time for question and answers. Then there's a nice FAQ that they have on paralegal practice audit. It's a great tool that kind of puts together everything. The bookkeeping guidelines, you can get the PDF version. There's an online version. I always like the PDF version because I like to download it and review it myself. Just to see if our software is constantly up to date with respect to how they are keeping their bylaw 9. But you have a PDF and this, I'll just put all the references so you can use them later. And for those who don't know us, we are a practice management software, and we do practice management and legal accounting. So you can sign up for our 30-day trial. These are some of our testimonials that people have given us, how they have been audited and how they kind of felt about it. As they were preparing for their practice review, they found that because we follow the guidelines so well, it was pretty useful. And I just put some testimonials, how somebody passed their audits in flying colors, because, when you do things, it's not just our software. Not all the credit here actually goes to our software. Most of the credit goes to you basically because you did this. This is basically maintaining yourself with a proper checklist. People who have proper checklists and do things on time will pass, audits no matter they use software or not. We're just saying our software helps you with all these things. Okay. So let's now take some time and actually review this beautiful checklist that the Law Society has. I'm going to put it on full screen, and then we'll kind of review it. And go through how, for example, they are asking you, hey, if you have clients, are you actually capturing, the source of clients, and this is where, I want to bring up our software, and if you actually do, you need to maintain something like this, I'm just going to show you, a quarterly view, and what the Law Society is expecting, as you saw in that, is a view like this, can you say, hey, referrals, so many, advertisements, so many, trade shows, so many, and kind of do that. You already impressed the auditor pretty well, already, So that's the key. So now let's go back to our checklist and view it in full. So then, these are some of the stuff that they're looking for in practice management. Can you identify your clients? Are you doing conflict of interest? Are you docketing time? These are standard things. Like, and if you have software like ours, you can just go and say yes. Like, you can just say, you can go to a matter and just say document generation, conflict screening, download, and you can just show the sample to the auditor and say, hey, look at my conflict screening. I've done all these things. It was a real estate matter. It was a new client. And there was no conflict. This is what I asked him to sign. You kind of move on with the question at a much faster pace. Okay. So now moving on to the next question here. Right? Let's get into the meat, which is the financial one. So they ask even things like this, does all your stationery have, all your branding and, all that stuff, they kind of have that, and it's beautiful because, if you kind of use software, that pretty much comes. I'm just going to do a sample bill of cost. Let's say you kind of send your client a bill of cost, right? You can show this to your auditor and say, hey, you're asking me for branding? I put it right on, even on my bill of cost. Right, here it is, you're taking the right steps to impress the auditor that your financial review is going to be much easier, right? Then moving on further, they're asking about things like, hey, do you do capital contributions? Are you maintaining profit and loss? How is the daily management of the firm done? So if you're using software, P&L, profit and loss is right there. You can just go and say, hey, look at my software, accounts, document generation, and I can say, here's my profit and loss statement, right? So if you look closely at what the Law Society is telling you with respect to these, this is what a legal accounting software actually does. It kind of tells you, hey, my family law was this much, my POA was this much, my small claims, here's your P&L. You kind of looked at it and said, just in this month of June, I've kind of made this much money. That's my profit, right? That's a thumbs up. So it's a great tool to have, and you're answering these questions, right? Now, we already touched client and service communication, and what we're trying to do is, I just try to highlight how you can do some of this stuff. They're asking you if you're maintaining detailed notes. You can show, hey, look at my docketing procedure, right? are you doing conflict checks? Yes. How are you addressing them? How are you having non-engagement procedures, right? You can just say, hey, here's my non-engagement template. You can just say document generation, non-engagement, download, and say, hey, look at my non-engagement template. I kind of clearly said, hey, this is what it is. I've kind of indicated that I'll not be acting on behalf of you. Everything is done. You can have a few samples and kind of highlight them through that. Taking it to the next step, they're asking what is there in the retainer, nature of scope, obligation. You can share with them some of your templates, right? You can say, hey, this is one of my templates. You can say retainer letter, download, and you can say, hey, look at my retainer letter. It has description of services. It has fee structure. How much am I charging? How much am I charging for my travel? How much am I charging for other assistance? Fees and disbursements, how much am I charging for each of that? If I'm my travel mileage, how much I will be charging, my interest, my retainer letter, how much am I going to take as a retainer, termination of legal services. These are something that they're asking here. If you look in very detail, they're asking you all those questions with respect to retainer letters. Do you have your confidentiality, your fee structure, termination clause, and even things like communication, are you communicating by email? What's the risk? I understand that these files will be stored in the cloud, and there is confidentiality issues. Putting all these things and showcasing this to your auditor is actually going to make your audit really, really, really fly by fast. Okay. The next thing is, they're asking you questions about, how you handling, retainer deposits properly. And this is where your reconciliation statement or, any bank statement with respect to how you record it can really help. They're asking you questions about, are you providing updates to your client in writing? If you're doing a good settlement statement, and let me do that, if you provide a good settlement statement, it's a statement and settlement of accounts, I don't think a client requires any more clarity than a settlement statement, because it clearly tells them what you did, clearly tells them all the retainers that happened in this matter, all the legal fees that were raised, right? And then it gives him a summary of money that came in and went out of trust and the money that was actually coming in. It even tells him, like, hey, you owe me $113, and we even give him a link to actually pay by credit card straight here. You can just click here and, start paying using your credit card. But, it's kind of things that an auditor is actually looking for. Moving on, file management. They're asking you questions about, like, how is it electronically management? Like, how is all this thing done? We basically manage files right in the quick view. Like, you can basically sort your files on archive, matter, closed. We have creation dates. We have creation dates. We have, when it was last modified, descriptions, code file numbers. You can sort them by each of that. Like, I can just say I want to sort by code file numbers, and it will show you all the ones where you have entered code file numbers. Here you go, right? You can sort them by title. So you are accessing the software right in front of the client, and you're showcasing that. The auditor is going to be pretty quick to move on to his other questions. Okay. Now, we only have about 10 minutes. I want to open the lines. Let me quickly go to financial management. So here they ask you so many things about trust, and, how do you do interim billing, ledgers, and all that stuff. What we have done in our software, and this is how, most softwares are organized, is right under your document, we have something called compliance. So if you click on that, we kind of tell you what are the documents that you need to do on a monthly basis. Basically, it's trust ledgers, general ledgers, the 4 journals, then the intermatter trust transfer report, fee book, expense book, trust reconciliation statement, and general reconciliation. That's it. These are the documents that they're looking for. And if you do this, as I mentioned in the presentation, on a monthly basis, you're pretty much covered, for your section on financial review, right? Like, do you have a somebody's asking a question, do you have a handbook? We have a handbook. Obviously, we have a handbook. If you go to help, in uLaw and click on, quick guide, we have a handbook. But we have gone beyond that. Like, you don't need handbooks, because the way we have done is we explain everything. Like, for example, let's say you want to do a reconciliation. I'm going to take a very simple example. If you're going to put a disbursement, let's say new disbursement, and it's a consultancy expense, we provide help right here. And if you click on that, it walks you through and says, what is consulting? How much do you want to charge the client? Put the date, put, the item name and, what was required, right? Like, it tells you, like, if you're going with override tax, like, do that. Like, what did it cost? What cost did you incur? Like, so we provide online help, which is more the newer way of doing it than quick books that you sit and read. But we do have online documentation as well under help that you can actually use. But this is how we kind of do it. So you can just close it and then actually start doing the work. So anything that you want to do in uLaw, if it's a disbursement or anything, like, even things like, in accounts, like, if you want to do an expense, or if you want to do like a capital injection, we provide you with a help file and say how you do capital injection into your firm. Like, when a partner or investor decides to invest, you do that. So this is how we provide help, okay, rather than, pages and pages of stuff that you need to read. Okay. Let me get back. I do have 2 more minutes, and then I want to fully open the lines. And look at this one, like, is your firm bookkeeping entered and posted on all on current times? Obviously, you can say, yeah, I do it on every monthly basis, right? Like, do you do a regular review? You can say yes. Like, you can answer things about cash, annual budgets, expense statements. Are you doing all that stuff? Like, you can answer. Like, then it comes to technology. These are questions that, your software company can answer. Like, we would provide you answers, yes, to all of them. Like, and, you can share that with your clients. Do you attend CPDs? Unfortunately, this one is not CPD today, but like hopefully the Law Society will approve. We have already applied for it, so we hope to get approval so that next time we present it, it is CPD approved. Have you reviewed your code of conduct, your time management? Do you have a proper to-do list? Like, you do all that stuff. And then your personal questions, obviously, like, that you have. So at this point, I've kind of covered most of what the software does, do you need a Form 9A for checks paid? No, Form 9A is only for electronic trust transfer. If it's a check, no, because why do you do a Form 9A? For an electronic transfer is because you want to record some very key elements that you actually record in a check here, and that's basically a paper trail. That's why you kind of need a Form 9A for electronic fund transfer and not for checks. That's a great question, actually. Okay. So at this point, I really want to open the floor for questions. This is purely, an audit-related webinar. So let's keep the questions to audit. If you want to find out more about our software, you can always go to our website, ulawpractice.com. I'll keep our presentation here open, and if you have any questions, shoot them my way. Can we set up uLaw to remind us of what we have to do on a weekly, monthly basis? The answer is yes. Yeah. Okay. As I told you, that one click, called compliance is exactly what you need to do. There's nothing, as I told you, this is exactly what you need to do. In uLaw, we capture all that stuff under a single button called compliance. So there's not a lot that you need to do. If you can do these 2 ledgers, these 4 journals, and these 5 documents on a monthly basis, you're pretty much done. Okay. So I have put a link. If you click on that link, it will take you to this page where you can kind of give your attendance, and all that stuff. Unfortunately, this time it's not CPD, but it will be a great version. Is there any version of uLaw software in French? Good question. Everything in uLaw is bilingual, by the way. So, for example, you don't even, it is in French. If you say document generation receipt, you can just say French, download, and your retainer receipt will be in French. So you don't have to really change language. Everything that you want is right here. That's a great question. It's not just about retainer receipts. Everything. If you just click here and say, I want to reprint my invoice, right? And I want to do it in the French language and just reprint it. It will reprint the entire invoice in French. There you go. On that too. Obviously, what you put in description obviously came in English because it was done in English, but if you had put that in French, that would have come in French too. Any questions on the audit side? You can always ask software questions to us later by email. Any questions on audit? Is anybody coming up for an audit? Do you have any rough questions that you want to run by? We can kind of share, yes, you can even at a matter level. I don't know what that answer is for, but so any questions on the audit side, feel free to bring it. I know this document is called Paralegal Checklist. I sincerely believe this is as applicable to lawyers as much as it is for paralegals, because nothing here is paralegal specific. So I strongly recommend that anybody going through an audit goes through this document, at a very, very detailed level, because this is pretty much what an auditor is going to ask you for, right? Okay. And let me bring back our presentation here. I want to keep it. There's still a couple of minutes left. I want to showcase to you the audit reference. If anybody wants to take a picture or a screenshot, there's something very helpful, but these are all Googleable. Just Google Spot Audit, Audit Checklist, Audit FAQ, and Bookkeeping Guidelines. This is what I exactly Googled to get these documents, but you can Google them and get them as well. I found this one of the best ones. This is very good. Bookkeeping Guidelines is your Bible. You need to read that, and Spot Audit. So I have a last minute. If anybody has any more questions, do reach out to us. As I told you, if you have a good, it need not be us. If you do the monthly regular procedures, And I'll put this back, like, if you review your bank statements weekly, if you do your monthly financials, those compliance statements that I showed you, quarterly procedures, just reviewing your client communication, all your procedures. Go through this checklist and your yearly review. I think you are ready for audit any time of the day. So with this, I want to bring my presentation to an end. Sincerely thank everybody for sitting through an entire hour. Thank you very much. And we'll, just a reminder, next week is 1.5 hours of CPD credit. Praveen will be here to present that one. This one, hopefully we'll get the CPD soon, and we'll be able to offer this as well on CPD. Thank you.